We understand that on the 50th day they didn't really tell her where they were taking the teenagers, but they took them and they closed the door behind and she stayed there. That's the last thing we know. It was the 50th day of the war, and we're now on day 159. It's been more than 100 days since. Anything could have happened. We don't know whether she is alone or together with others, dead or alive, above the ground or under the ground. Everything's possible. And we know that there were talks about a new deal that will bring all the women that are still held by Hamas back and all the other hostages. There were talks about doing this before Ramadan. Ramadan started 2 days ago. And still no deal. From what we understand right now, Hamas still refuses to sign the deal that will stop the war, will stop the fighting, will let the people of the northern part of the Gaza Strip back to their homes and the hostages back to their homes. I don't really know why. But here in this place, in this hostage square, we as families gather together to remind our government and the whole world that the hostages are still there. We know that when the war started, there were 5 goals to this war and none of them was releasing the hostages. It wasn't on the table. We had to put it on the table, and we had to keep on reminding the Israeli government and the governments of all the world that this is the main issue. We now know that Israeli soldiers who go out to fight in Gaza see in front of their eyes nothing more than getting the hostages back. That's the most important thing. That's what we fight for here in Israel. We don't fight for the death of anyone. We fight for the lives of hostages. We fight for the life of our nation. We believe in life, and on the other side, unfortunately, we have a terror organization that sanctifies death and sees death as holy. That's not what we believe. We believe that if we can bring all the hostages back, we can put an end to this tragedy and start rebuilding our life. Maybe go back to mourning, to grieving for my aunt that was murdered that day. We really hope that Carmel is okay. And we learn with each day about new hostages that we thought were alive but are actually dead right now. Just yesterday we learned about Itai Chen, a hostage that we thought was alive and figured out it was dead all along. We really hope that we don't get any more news like these in the next few days, and that finally we'll have a chance and we'll hear some good news about a deal being signed between the two sides. We'll get all the hostages back, both the ones that were taken on October 7th, 130 of them, and 4 more that are almost 10 years there. Hisham Sayed, Avera Mengistu, Ron Shaul, and Adar Gold. I know that we're dealing with a terror organization that's, it uses psychological terror on us all the time, lies all the time, and doesn't even care about the lives of its own people. So it's not a fair fight. But if you told me at the beginning of the war that more than 100 hostages will be back through a deal, I'd tell you no way. But now I know that it's possible. I know that getting hostages back is possible through a deal. We had 3 hostages that were rescued in a military operation, Fernando and Luis and Ori, and more than 100 that were saved through a deal. I believe that a deal is possible, and the mediators believe that a deal is possible. And I know that our government is doing a lot. If there is no deal, they hadn't done enough. And I think that they should keep on working on it, that it should be at the top of their priorities. And before we started campaigning for this, it wasn't in their priorities at all. So we now know that our efforts were very effective in putting this on the table, first in the priority, and we have to keep on fighting to make sure that it actually happens. I know that it's called a prisoner exchange or a prisoner swap, but it's the wrong way to look at it, because my cousin is not a prisoner. She's a hostage. She was taken from the house of her parents. She didn't do anything. She's not a criminal of any sort. She's just a civilian, exactly. You know, some prisoners are also civilians, but they were accused of harsh crimes, sometimes even murders. That's the people on the other side. And so that's not a fair swap between prisoners and hostages. But I see that this is one of the things that's on the table, and I wouldn't want to see prisoners just being released. You know, I don't think that's just. But if this is what's on the table, I think Israel can handle it. I think that this security and our own power as a nation does not conclude in the number of prisoners that were released, but on how strong we are and how we can manage with all the people that are trying to ruin our lives, to kill us and to hurt us in many ways. We have to make sure that tragedies like October 7th are not going to happen again. That's the most important thing. And we have to keep ourselves safe from the people who were in prison and the people who were not in prison that are going to be released. I talked to the Minister of Defense a few months ago, and he said that he doesn't see any value to prisoners in the Israeli prison if there is even one hostage held in Gaza.